Hey everyone, ready to dive into a language that's vibrant, diverse, and full of surprises. We're going deep into the world of Yoruba.
Yeah, Yoruba. It's spoken by millions across West Africa and even beyond.
Right, think Nigeria, Benin, Togo. You'll even find it woven into diaspora religions in the Americas. It's everywhere.
But before we go too far, I got to ask, for those of us who, might not be familiar, what makes Yoruba so special?
Well, think of it this way. Yoruba, it's not just one language, really. It's more like a family of languages, or maybe like dialects, all these different ways of speaking that are connected but also unique.
So it's not like you learn Yoruba and you're done, right?
Yeah.
There's more to it.
Exactly. Imagine like you're traveling through Nigeria, right? You go from one region to the next, and the Yoruba you hear, it changes. Different accents, different words, even some grammar stuff.
Wow, so within Yoruba itself, there's a whole world of diversity. That's fascinating. It really is. There are 5 major dialect areas, at least in Nigeria: Northwest, Northeast, Central, Southwest, and Southeast. But, and this is important, these aren't like strict borders on a map.
Oh, okay, I see.
They kind of blend into each other, like a linguistic melting pot. It's pretty cool, actually.
I can imagine. But with all these dialects, how do people from different parts of, say, Nigeria understand each other?
That's where standard Yoruba comes in. Think of it as, like a common ground. It's the version you usually hear on the news, in education, those more formal settings.
So it's like a bridge between all the different dialects.
Exactly. And the story of how it came about, it's fascinating. It goes back to the 1850s with a man named Samuel Crowther.
Okay, I know that name. Wasn't he like a really important figure in
He was the first native African Anglican bishop. And, on top of everything else, he took on this massive project. He wanted to create a standardized grammar for Yoruba and even translate the Bible.
Wow. Talk about a huge undertaking. So he's the reason we have standard Yoruba.
He played a major role, definitely. He mainly based it on the Oyo and Ibadan dialects. Those were considered like prestigious at the time. But he also very deliberately incorporated elements from other dialects as well. So standard Yoruba, it's really a blend.
It's like he wove them all together. That's amazing.
It is. And that work, it laid the groundwork for a really rich written tradition in Yoruba, which, by the way, goes back even further than Crowther.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that. I've heard Yoruba has a long history with writing, going back centuries. What did they use back then before, pens and paper?
Okay, so get ready for this. They used a script called Ajami.
Ajami.
Yeah, and this is the amazing part. It's basically Arabic script, but adapted to write Yoruba.
No way. That's
Yeah.
incredible. So they were using Arabic characters to represent Yoruba sounds. That blows my mind.
It's a testament to, like, human ingenuity, right? Finding ways to make things work.
Absolutely. So when did they start using Ajami for Yoruba?
We're talking way back, 17th century. It wasn't until later, with missionaries becoming more influential, that the Latin alphabet started being used for Yoruba.
Right, right. So it was a gradual shift then from Ajami to the Latin alphabet. Not like someone just flipped a switch overnight and everyone was on board with a new writing system.
Definitely not. It took time, and even then there were like debates, different opinions. It wasn't until 1966 that the Yoruba Orthography Committee finally established the standardized Latin-based system that's widely used today.
Wow, 1966. Surprisingly recent when you think about it.
Yeah, and even today, there are still some variations in how Yoruba is written in different places. Like there are some differences between Nigeria and Benin, for example.
Fascinating. It really shows how much language can change and adapt even in its written form.
Exactly. It's a living thing. But it's pretty cool that there are folks out there who are like passionate about those earlier forms of written Yoruba, keeping those traditions alive.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, did you know that in 2011, a Beninese priest, Tulula Eguntosin, actually tried to introduce a whole new script?
Seriously. A brand new script just for Yoruba? That's amazing.
It was called the Oduva script.
Yeah.
He claimed it was based on, get this, a vision. Sadly, it didn't really catch on, but
Yeah.
still, talk about dedication.
Wow. Okay, I'm sensing a theme here. Yoruba, it's more than just a language. It's deeply tied to identity, to culture, to history.
100%. And that connection, it's woven into the very fabric of the language. Take, for example, the influence of Islam.
Oh, yeah. I bet there are tons of Arabic loanwords in Yoruba.
Oh, tons. Like the word for sky, sanma, that's borrowed from Arabic. Aldubarika, meaning blessing, also Arabic. It's everywhere.
Wow. So even in everyday words, you can see these traces of cultural exchange. It's like a history lesson embedded in the language itself.
You got it. And it goes even further than just words. Some days of the week, like Jumeau for Friday, that's also from Arabic.
Really? You're blowing my mind here. Okay, so we've talked about dialects and writing systems and cultural influences. What about the sounds of Yoruba? What can you tell me about that?
Ah, the sounds. Get ready to have your mind blown again because Yoruba, it's a tonal language.
Tonal. That means like the pitch of your voice changes the meaning of a word.
Exactly. So you could say a word and it means one thing. Then say the exact same word, but change your pitch up or down, and boom, it has a completely different meaning.
Seriously. Okay, that's amazing. Can you give me an example?
Of course. Let's take the word. Oh, oh. If you say it with a high tone on that last part, B, it means he jumped.
Okay, he jumped. Got it.
But if you say it with a mid-tone on that same B, so it sounds like oh B, it means he is forward. Completely different meaning.
Whoa. That's wild. It's like the language itself is musical.
You know, that's exactly what it's like. It's music built into the words. And actually, did you know that you can actually whistle a whole sentence in Yoruba?
Wait, are you serious? You're telling me you can whistle a whole sentence and someone else who speaks Yoruba will understand?
I'm totally serious. You might change the consonants and vowels a bit while whistling, but the tones, those crucial meaning-changing tones, they stay the same. So yeah, you can actually have a conversation whistling.
That is insane. I gotta hear that.
Well, it just so happens I have a recording. Here, listen to this.
Whoa. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It sounds so different from anything I've ever heard. It's like a secret code.
It kind of is, right? Like a secret way of communicating, just using those tones.
Wow. That just opens up a whole other dimension of Yoruba.
Yeah.
I'm amazed. So those tones, they're not just for speaking or whistling, right?
You're right. They're everywhere. Like in drumming, for example.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking about that. Yoruba drumming is incredible. It's so complex, so rhythmic.
It really is. And a lot of that complexity comes from the tones. You know, the way the drums mimic the tones of the Yoruba language. It's like the drums are speaking.
Right. It's like they're having a conversation, but using rhythms and tones instead of words.
Exactly. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. Okay, so we've established that tones are like the backbone of Yoruba. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Speaking, whistling, drumming. But how on earth do you write this down? Like, how do you capture those subtle tone changes on paper?
That's the million-dollar question. It's something that linguists and computer scientists are still trying to figure out, actually.
Really? It's that challenging.
It is. Because, you know, on a standard keyboard, you've got your letters, your numbers, your punctuation, but no tones. So how do you represent those tones in writing?
Right. It's not like there's a tone key on your keyboard. Or is there?
Not yet, at least. There have been different systems developed over the years using things like accent marks or special symbols, but it's still a work in progress.
Fascinating. I never realized how complicated it could be to write down a language that's so reliant on tone.
It's a real challenge, and, you know, it even has implications for the digital world.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. If you're trying to search for something online and the tones aren't marked correctly, you might not find what you're looking for. Or you might end up with a bunch of irrelevant results.
Ah, that makes sense. It's like the difference between searching for resume with an accent and resume without one. Two completely different meanings.
Exactly. So, yeah, the whole issue of how to represent tones in writing, it's not just an academic debate. It has real-world consequences.
That's so interesting. I never would have thought about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Dialects, writing systems, sounds. What about grammar? Is Yoruba grammar as complex as its sound system?
Well, the good news is Yoruba grammar is actually considered to be quite logical and regular, especially compared to some other languages.
Oh, that's a relief. I was a little worried there for a minute.
No worries. One thing that makes Yoruba grammar relatively straightforward is that it's what we call an isolating language.
Isolating language, what does that mean?
It means that words tend to stand alone. You don't have a lot of prefixes and suffixes added onto words to change their meaning like you do in some other languages.
So it's more about the order of the words then?
Exactly. And speaking of word order, Yoruba follows a pretty standard subject-verb-object pattern, just like English.
Okay, that's reassuring. So it's not completely alien to English speakers.
Not at all. But of course, there are some unique features of Yoruba grammar that make it interesting.
Oh, I bet. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's talk about how Yoruba forms questions.
Okay, I'm listening.
So in English, we use the word who to ask about both people and things, right?
Right. Who was that? Who ate the last cookie?
Exactly. But Yoruba makes a distinction. For questions about people, you use the word tani. But for questions about things, you use kini.
Wow, that's so interesting. So even in the grammar, there's this sense of like classifying the world, making distinctions between humans and everything else.
You've got it. It's a different way of thinking about the world, and it's reflected in the grammar.
That's so cool. It makes you realize how much our language shapes the way we see things.
It really does. And this idea of like different perspectives, it comes up in other aspects of Yoruba grammar too, like how they talk about location and direction.
Oh, how so?
Well, in English, we use prepositions a lot, right? On, in, under, above. But Yoruba doesn't really have prepositions in the same way. Instead, they often use spatial nouns that are, get this, related to parts of the body.
Wait, what? Parts of the body? That's amazing. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so imagine you want to say something is on top of something else.
Mhm.
In Yoruba, you might use the word oyi, which means head. So you're literally saying it's at the head of the other thing.
Wow, that's so cool. It's like the language is physically grounded in the body.
It is. And this system, it's not just limited to head. They use other body parts too, like inu for inside, which is also the word for stomach. It's a fascinating way of thinking about space.
That is fascinating. Okay, I have to ask, what about the Yoruba number system? I've heard it's really unique.
Oh yeah, the Yoruba number system. Get ready for a wild ride. Because it's not based on 10, like we're used to.
Wait, what? It's not based on 10. What is it based on then?
20. Yoruba uses a base 20 system, also known as a vigesimal system.
A base 20 system. That means you're counting in groups of 20.
You got it. And the word for 20, ogun, it's like the foundation of the whole system.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So how does it work in practice?
Well, think of it this way. Instead of having separate words for numbers like 30, 40, 50, and so on, Yoruba uses multiples of 20.
Okay, so far so good.
So, for example, the number 40 in Yoruba is literally 22 times.
Oh, that's so different from how we think about numbers.
It is, and to make things even more interesting, they often use subtraction to form numbers that fall between those neat multiples of 20.
Subtraction. Okay, give me an example.
All right, let's take the number 17. In Yoruba, you wouldn't have a separate word for 17. You'd say something like 3 less than 20.
Wow, that's like a mental math workout.
It keeps you on your toes. And, this base 20 system, it goes all the way up to really large numbers.
Seriously. So how would you say like a million in Yoruba?
Well, you wouldn't use the word million. You'd break it down into multiples of 20 using a combination of addition, subtraction, and multiplication.
Wow. That's incredible. It's like a whole different way of thinking about math.
It is. And, it's not just about the numbers themselves. The Yoruba number system is also really interesting because it reflects their history and culture.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, for example, Yoruba has special numeral forms that were traditionally used for counting cowrie shells.
Cowrie shells.
Yeah. Cowrie shells were once used as a form of currency in West Africa.
Wow, I had no idea. So they had a whole separate counting system just for these shells.
They did. And these special counting forms, they're still used today in certain contexts. It's like a window into the past, a reminder of how Yoruba culture has evolved over time.
That's amazing. That's like those cowrie shells. They're not just shells. They're like little pieces of history preserved in the language.
Exactly. They tell a story. And speaking of stories, I think it's time we talked about the incredible impact that Yoruba has had on literature and music.
Oh, yes. Yoruba literature and music are so rich and vibrant.
They really are. And it all goes back to that deep connection between language, culture, and identity that we've been talking about.
Right. It's like with Yoruba, the language itself is a form of art.
It is. And that artistry, it shines through in so many different genres of Yoruba literature, from oral histories to poetry to proverbs to novels and plays.
I love Yoruba proverbs. They're so full of wisdom and insight.
Me too. They're like little nuggets of truth passed down through generations. Do you have a favorite?
Ooh, that's a tough one. There are so many good ones. But one that always sticks with me is Ile latinko, eki alotle.
What does that mean?
It means it is the house we build that poverty cannot enter.
Ooh, I like that one. It's about taking responsibility for your own life, about building a solid foundation for yourself and your family.
Exactly. It's a powerful message, and it's something that resonates deeply within Yoruba culture. This idea of self-reliance, of hard work, of community.
Absolutely. And these proverbs, they're not just something you read in a book. They're woven into everyday conversations. They're used in storytelling. They're even incorporated into music.
Right. Speaking of music, Yoruba music is incredible. It's so full of life, so rhythmic, so danceable.
It really is. And there's such a wide variety of genres, too, from traditional Yoruba music with its drumming and chanting to more modern styles like juju and fuji.
I love juju music. It's so upbeat and energetic.
It is. It emerged in the 1930s, and it's all about those catchy rhythms and Yoruba lyrics.
And Fuji music.
Fuji is another hugely popular genre. It's evolved a lot over time, but it often features a mix of traditional Yoruba instruments like the talking drum alongside more modern instruments like synthesizers.
The talking drum. Now, that's an instrument I want to know more about. How does it talk?
It's pretty incredible. Basically, the drummer uses their hands to vary the tension of the drum head, which changes the pitch of the drum. And with practice, they can make the drum mimic the tones and inflections of human speech.
No way. So you can actually communicate using the talking drum.
You can. Skilled drummers can use it to reproduce Yoruba words, phrases, even whole stories. It's like a form of musical storytelling.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's not just an instrument, it's like a voice, a way of preserving and transmitting Yoruba culture and history.
Exactly. It's a powerful symbol of Yoruba oral traditions. And speaking of traditions, I think it's important to mention the role that Yoruba has played in diaspora religions.
Oh, yes. Religions like Candomblé in Brazil and Santeria in Cuba, they both have strong roots in Yoruba spirituality and language.
They do. These religions emerged during the transatlantic slave trade as a way for enslaved Africans to hold on to their beliefs and practices, even in a new and often hostile environment.
So even though they were forcibly separated from their homelands, they found ways to maintain those spiritual connections. And the Yoruba language played a crucial role in that.
Absolutely. And it's amazing to see how those connections have endured over centuries. Today, you have millions of people around the world who practice these religions, and Yoruba words, songs, and rituals are still an integral part of their faith.
It's a testament to the power of culture and language to transcend time and space, to connect people across continents and generations.
It really is. And it's not just about preserving the past. Yoruba language and culture are still evolving today, adapting to the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century.
That's so important to remember. Languages aren't static, they're constantly changing and evolving.
Exactly. And that's part of what makes them so fascinating to study. They're like windows into the human experience, reflecting our creativity, our resilience, and our endless capacity for adaptation.
It's incredible, right? These traditions, these languages, they travel, they take root in new places, but they still hold on to those echoes of where they came from.
Absolutely. It's like this beautiful blend of continuity and change, and it speaks to this incredible resilience of culture, of the human spirit, to hold on to those pieces of themselves, even when faced with such difficult circumstances.
It's powerful stuff. And, it makes you think about Yoruba today, right? It's not stuck in the past. It's dynamic. It's evolving right alongside those who speak it.
Exactly. It's like this living, breathing thing, constantly interacting with the world around it, taking in new influences, but always staying true to its core.
I love that. It's like a reminder that change is inevitable, right? But that doesn't mean we lose ourselves in the process.
You got it. And Yoruba, with its rich history, its unique features, it offers this amazing lens through which to view those dynamics, those complexities of language and culture.
It does. I mean, think about it. We've just scratched the surface here, and we've already uncovered so much. The tonal system, the grammar, the number system, the literature, the music. It's mind-blowing.
It is, and it just goes to show that the more we explore these different ways of communicating, of seeing the world, the more we realize how much we have to learn from each other.
Absolutely. It's like opening up a window into a whole new way of thinking, a whole new way of being.
Precisely. So to everyone listening, don't be afraid to dive in to explore those unfamiliar territories, whether it's Yoruba or any other language that sparks your curiosity.
Because who knows what amazing discoveries await.
Exactly. Because ultimately, it's through those journeys of linguistic exploration that we truly begin to understand the incredible richness and diversity of human experience.
Beautifully said. And on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. A huge thank you to all of you for joining us today. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.